Today on the podcast, we are talking all things Apple news. Connor and I are both avid Apple users. I'm recording this on a MacBook because my Windows computer was crapping out on me and not working. So, sorry, Microsoft. Mostly you're my preference, but I don't know. Anyways, we both also have iPhones, but we're going to be talking about some cool things Apple has released in their latest big developer conference yesterday, and also some letdowns that have happened. But before we get into that, we have to say that Apple prefaced this entire event with an absolutely viral paper on AI that recently came out, where they kind of tried to put a little pin in the AI hype balloon and pop it a little bit. So we'll be breaking all of that down. Connor, what was your, what's the most interesting thing here that you're seeing from that paper Apple released? Because I saw you were blown up on LinkedIn about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the paper. And it's funny because it popping the kind of like the hype balloon is sort of like a total Rorschach test. And by the way, like when we say this, it's very much like, how do you see AI? And by the way, I want to sort of like shout this out in the beginning, Jaeden, because I was thinking about this yesterday. Guys, if you haven't seen Jaden's AI box, you have to check this out. This is sort of like Jaden, like that Jaden is this crazy entrepreneur who has built this unbelievable software tool that where you can pay it's like $20 a month. And is that right, Jaden? Is it 20 bucks?
Yeah.
$20 a month where you can kind of go on and you can have access to every single model. So lest you are still thinking like, well, is this model better than this model? It's blowing up, which I'm so happy about. Listen, we were praying that it would blow up, but we did, you never know with these things, but Jaden has poured his heart and soul into these things. So AIbox.ai, is that what it is, Jaden?
Yep. Uh-huh.
And the coolest thing about this thing, though, it sort of looks like a ChatGPT interface, except like with little tabs, and so you can sort of like check out how Claude compares to ChatGPT, compares to Gemini. You can do the image models, everything like that. It's still $20 a month. So again, I'm spending God knows how much, hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this. So anyway, check it out, AI Box. It's unbelievable. Jaden, I just wanted to shout that out because like when we see a paper like this, and the paper is called literally The Illusion of Thinking, Understanding the Strengths and Limitations of Reasoning Models via the Lens of Complex or a problem complexity. How does that paper go viral? It goes viral because we're all trying to figure out these large language models. And again, you have sort of like the people on the side that you and I are on, which is like, this is changing everything. And then you have the people who are like, see, this is what's going wrong. And so let me just sort of like give you a couple of things about this before we get into what happened at Apple's conference of where they are with AI. So essentially what they did was they tested all these reasoning models. And what they did is they had it tested on sort of like, instead of, the kind of like the straight up math problems, which is how they usually test these things, they tested them on puzzles. So it's like that, Tower of Hanoi or whatever, all that sort of stuff. And they were kind of like watching how they think, right? Step by step and all that sort of stuff. And what they were finding was some kind of really interesting things, right? Which was if you add like irrelevant details, like if there's like a 65% performance drop, there's like, three zones, like simple and regular, there's like weird behavior. And this is the other thing. We could sort of like go deep into this, but I don't really want to do that because again, everybody's going to interpret this differently. Here's how I saw it. Really interesting stuff. It was sort of saying like reasoning models aren't really reasoning. They're not really thinking on really hard problems. They give up. They use fewer, what they call like thinking tokens kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is sort of like used by a lot of people. Jaden, you saw this all over social media too, right? Where people are like, see, this thing isn't thinking. It's all a scam, all that kind of stuff. When in fact, first of all, that's not really what it's doing, right? It's sort of like these same models are like helping change the world right now. So forget about that. But the other thing was that, and I think Ethan Malik was pointing this out because somebody else pointed it out. These reasoning models weren't designed for these kind of puzzles, right? They're trained for sort of like messy, open-ended thinking and stuff like that. And so they actually stop using those tokens. So in fact, but Jaden, to your point in the beginning, it's so funny that like they led with this thing being like, I know we're not doing much AI, but AI kind of sucks anyway. Do you know what
I know. I think so. That was, I think, what a lot of people were like sort of disappointed by was like, obviously, we're all excited for more research around AI. This stuff's more interesting. If people are overhyping something, I think it's fair to call, balls and strikes. So I think that's totally cool. People also are prefacing this by saying like, super cool Apple that you can kind of pour water on. I don't know, whatever you think is the AI is not really reasoning. It's sort of a scam, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, like Apple literally doesn't have a mass market AI tool that everyone's using. They're delayed on their AI Siri by over a year. Like it just doesn't look very good to, it's kind of like, well, we can't have it. So we want to like kick everyone else or, everyone else that has it down. So that was, I think, what a lot of people were sort of disappointed by was maybe the optics on that. Does that mean that Apple's toast? Does that mean that the AI industry's toast? I think no. I think a lot of that was also overblown. at the end of the day, I don't really care whether it's reasoning. I never actually believed the AI was a sentient being that was figuring out my complex tasks. I don't really
Yeah,
like, and I think 99% of users don't really care anything about that. They just care that it gets a good result. And right now it's getting a pretty good result, so people are excited. And if you're a technology company and you're unable to deliver this product that everybody wants, that's giving you a good result, regardless of how smart or intelligent or AGI it is, I think that it's not very good for your technology company. So I think Apple needs to work harder on it, and most people probably don't really care about the paper. Like 99% of users aren't really
so I
concerned
think
about it.
that's exactly right. That's the other thing is that it's like ultimately, and I was writing about this because I kind of called this like the flying car problem. It's like if you went back to medieval times and gave people a car and be like, hey, you can carry like, 400 pounds of stuff and you can carry 6 people in climate controlled and you can travel 500 miles without stopping. And people be like, amazing. But then there's always gonna be that one dude that's like, well, can it, I have to get over this river. Can it fly? And you're like, well, no, it can't fly. He's like, well, I really need to get over the river. So like, there's always like that guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Who cares if it's reasoning? Like this thing has changed my life. I use it as like a consultant and all that kind of stuff. Like, do I really care what's going on under the hood? Not really. Is there is there some kind of implication for like is AGI not coming as maybe? I mean, AGI is sort of like is that delayed? Maybe. But again, what do I care? What do you care? What does anybody care?
Uh,
Does it help you or not? That's the part. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So I think at the end of the day, very, very useful tool. Most people don't really care about the paper. Let's get into what Apple has actually released
Fair enough.
at their big developer conference. They essentially came out. A lot of people already knew from an announcement that Apple did in March that their Siri was going to be delayed, their new Apple Siri. I have friends that literally went and bought the latest iPhone because they were ready for Apple Intelligence, and they're telling me
Unbelievable.
they're like, I'm so bummed, man. Like Apple really like launched it. This is the only reason I got this new iPhone. And now when I ask a Siri a question, it just kicks me over to ChatGPT all the time. Like I could just get the ChatGPT app and ask it a question if I really wanted. So I think there are some people that are definitely disappointed in this. I have 2 points to make on this. One is that they are trying to do something a little bit ambitious, but you would expect they're super late to the party. People expect them to leapfrog some current tech a little bit and try to come up with something innovative other than just copying people with, let's say just a clone of ChatGPT or already ChatGPT embedded. And so what they're trying to do now is actually make the iPhone able to, when you tell it to do something, Siri's actually able to go execute tasks on apps. And this is I'll admit it's a challenging problem, but I will say they're not the only people that are working on this, and some people have solved this by and large in a way which I would say OpenAI's Operator, which I don't know if you've tried it recently. I just got it this month again because it added their new reasoning model to it. So I'm like, fine, I'll pay $200 again and try it out. And it wasn't perfect. It is, I would say 30-40% better than it was when it first launched, when I first tested it out.
Really?
And I'm actually able to get it to do big tasks. My only gripe with it is that, and maybe this is also like a user problem. You probably wouldn't have this with Apple. If you go tell it to do like a task and it goes and does a task, it should be able to do that. Operator can do that. My problem is I'm like, go do this task and then go do it like 40 times. I'm like, go log into like 40 different podcasts that are clients for my podcast studio. Go and look at all of their analytics and type them all into this spreadsheet. And it gets through like 20 of them and then it kind of stops and glitches. And then I got to copy and paste the prompt again and reboot it. And then it will get the other 20. So sometimes it's got like some timeout errors. But to be fair, like I've had it run for 30 minutes straight, accomplishing a task for me that is very menial and mind numbing. And usually I would just hire like a virtual assistant to do it. So like for me, I can see that this is making some serious progress. If Apple should be able to solve this, is what was.
The thing is, but I don't know. I mean, look, we love Apple. Like all my products are Apple, all that sort of stuff. But the argument that people are making, which is like, yeah, see, Apple, and these are like the OpenAI hater kind of thing, community and like the anti-hype community typically, which is out there saying like, see, Apple played it smart. You think this was Apple's plan? Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
Think about Apple. How big is Apple, right? Apple's like a top 5 company in the world, right? Just like by market cap or whatever. It's got to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the value of having their own frontier model. And by the way, they're like, oh, it's hard to create a frontier model. Yeah, I know, but Grok is unbelievable, right? And Elon did that in like 3 months or something like that, right? I mean, obviously OpenAI, Gemini, everybody has, not everybody, but there's a bunch of frontier models out there. Apple could have easily done it. And then they could have owned the entire supply chain. And right now, they're like sending people, you're telling me that they weren't trying to do that. Of course they were trying to do that. It just drives me bonkers when there's like apologists. Like, I love Apple. I love it. But anyway, so like, yeah, so this like the latest, the sort of like Tim Cook getting up there, I barely paid attention. It was just nothing. It was like new screens and stuff like that,
Yeah, I'm not as excited about the the glass,
Yeah.
the new glass thing. But okay, I will tell you what they did do. I will give Apple their flowers. They
All
did
right.
make a couple interesting announcements and features. Number one, they are going to allow developers to access the on-device foundation models. So Apple does technically have their own kind of AI models. The reason why they don't really release them to the public and in a big way, in my opinion, is because they're okay and they work, but they're not great. If you put these things on LLM Arena, they would not perform incredibly well. But like, does that really matter? Because I use older versions of ChatGPT all the time for projects, and like, it could still summarize the article and give me some bullet points for a thing I need really quick for an XYZ task. So like, it doesn't really matter sometimes when you don't always need like the most frontier, best cutting edge model. Sometimes you really want it and sometimes you don't. So you always want to have access to it. But anyways, so I think that's why they're not really releasing it to everyone, but they are giving access to developers to it, which is cool. And the cool thing is it's on device. So I think a lot of people like the security of you being able to compute things on device and also not having to use third parties, and it's like free, right? It's all just running on your phone. So I think a lot of people do like that about it. The other thing that they've done is live translation. Now, I think this one is, yeah, this one's cool, but also maybe less exciting than some people think. But I'll give you them the good part. The good part is when you send a text message in another language, it live translates that. That's pretty cool in iMessage. Also on FaceTime, when you're chatting, it will live translate your conversation, but it just has transcription at the top. I like the feature. I think this is a really cool direction. I would have liked to see Apple copy literally any of the other startups out there that are already doing this, except they're cloning the user's voice and they're just playing back the voice. In fact, there's literally APIs in 11 Labs right now that if you could deal with like a 3 or 4 second delay, you could literally get FaceTime conversations live translated in the person's voice. And they're cutting down the delays too, so they're just getting less and less. So I would have liked to see Apple do that, but they have like sort of a text transcription translation, which is useful. I'll give them some props on there. Is it the most cutting edge? No. Is 11 Labs doing it better? Yes, but it's something.
I mean, and look, I know we're at time. We're going to wrap this up, but Jaeden, that's the thing. Like everything you're talking about, like I think it's really cool, the translation. I really do. However, how often do you need that? Like, how often are you talking to somebody in a different language on FaceTime? Like, it's just so rare. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what you do, you need sort of a small model on you. Now they're going to have like their, kind of crappy version of their small model, which I'm sure gets blown out of the water by all the tiny, Geminis and by all the tiny, deep seeks and everything else. And yet, just because it's native, people will use it. Listen, okay, we're going to wrap this up here. But here's the point. We love Apple. But I think Apple is sort of like giving up the AI race. And that's a little bit disappointing. Doesn't make Apple products any more useful or useless. It's just where we are. Apple, come on, give us something these days. Anyway, listen, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this one, and we will see you next time.